Nearly 1,000 years ago, one man rose from the vast, unforgiving steppe and shook the very foundations of the world. His name was Genghis Khan, and he built an empire larger than any other in human history. It stretched from the frozen tundras of Siberia to the scorching deserts of Persia, from the Great Wall of China to the bustling streets of Baghdad. This was no ordinary man. This was a warlord who forged a fractured and broken people into the most feared fighting force the world had ever known. But what if I told you that Genghis Khan, the man who ruled more land than the Romans, did so with a singular vision? A vision built not just on warfare, but on unity, strategy, and a brutal sense of justice. Picture this. It's the year 1206. The Mongol tribes are scattered, constantly warring amongst themselves. A young boy named Temujin has already endured unimaginable hardships, kidnapped at 9, betrayed by his own clan, and left to fight for survival in the wilderness. He saw the brutalities of war, the betrayals, and the raw, savage way of life that defined his people. But the lessons he learned in the unforgiving steppe would forge him into someone far greater than anyone could have ever imagined. He would become Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the conqueror whose name would send tremors through the world for centuries. But how did a boy, born into such despair, become the man who would build the largest contiguous empire in history? It wasn't just the battles he won, or the warriors he commanded. What made Genghis Khan stand apart was his sheer determination to unite an entire people who had never known unity. The Mongols were disjointed and divided, locked in blood feuds over power, land, and resources. Yet Genghis Khan saw something they didn't envision of a unified Mongol nation, where loyalty, discipline, and a shared cause would triumph over the chaos that had kept them apart. But it wasn't just his fierce will that drove his conquests. It was his mastery of the art of war, his use of psychological warfare, and his innovative military tactics. Above all, it was his ability to inspire unwavering loyalty in his men. While his rivals built their armies through sheer numbers, Genghis Khan crafted one of the most efficient and terrifying military machines the world had ever seen. Horsemen, archers, and spies, each was a perfect cog in the machinery of his conquest. Every battle was not just a fight for territory, but a battle for hearts and minds. He knew that fear could be a weapon as powerful as steel. As the Mongol Empire grew, so too did its legend. Great cities like Samarkand, Baghdad, and Nishapur fell before his unstoppable forces. His armies, seemingly invincible, swept across the ancient Silk Road, crushing anything in their path. The very idea of a Mongol invasion sent shockwaves through entire civilizations. But, as we'll soon discover, Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror. He was also a statesman, a lawmaker, and a builder of empires. His legacy wouldn't just be the bloodshed that followed him, but also the infrastructure, trade, and cultural exchanges that flourished under his reign. He established a postal system, the Yam, which connected his vast empire, and enforced a rule of law, the Yasa, that brought order to his people. He promoted trade and protected merchants, effectively creating one of the first free trade zones in history. So how did Genghis Khan come to rule the world? How did a man from such humble beginnings become a figure whose legacy still echoes through the corridors of history? This story is not just about conquest, it's about vision, leadership, and the ability to transform chaos into order. It's a story of survival, of triumph against all odds, and of a leader whose ambition knew no limits. Imagine the dust of the Mongol steppe kicking up beneath the hooves of thousands of horses. The roar of battle is coming, and with it, a force that will change the course of history forever. The world is about to witness the rise of one of its most unstoppable figures. This is the story of how Genghis Khan ruled the world. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time in the vast, unforgiving wilderness of the Mongol steppes. A boy named Temujin was born in 1162, not into a life of comfort, but into a world of constant war. His father, a tribal chief, was a powerful warrior, but that power was a double-edged sword. When Temujin was just 9, his father was poisoned by rivals, and his family was cast out, abandoned by their tribe to survive alone in the harsh wilderness. These early years were a brutal school of hunger, loneliness, and betrayal. Temujin learned quickly that trust was a luxury and power was not given, it had to be seized. But where others saw only chaos, this young boy saw an opportunity. He possessed a sharp, calculating mind that could see beyond the fractured, feuding tribes of the steppes. He began to build a following, not just with his skill in battle, but with something far more powerful, a vision of unity. He promised an end to the endless infighting, a new beginning for a people torn apart by old grudges. His name began to be spoken with respect, and soon with fear. Temujin was relentless, ruthless in his pursuit of a unified Mongol people. He knew he had to break the old tribal divisions that kept them weak. He didn't just want to conquer, he wanted to build something greater. In 1186, after a series of bloody conflicts, the Mongol leaders gathered at a great council, a Kurultai. There, Temujin was declared Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. He didn't rule by birthright. He ruled by the sheer force of his will and the unyielding loyalty he inspired. Under his leadership, the disjointed tribes would become one nation, a unified force that would soon sweep across the world. But Genghis Khan's genius wasn't just in uniting his people, it was in how he waged war. He understood that battle wasn't just about brute strength. It was about tactics, deception, and psychological warfare. He mastered the art of using fear as a weapon. Often, the mere rumor of his army's approach was enough to make entire cities surrender without a fight. The battle was won before the first arrow was ever loosed. His first major campaign outside the steppes was against the powerful Jin dynasty in northern China. The Jin had betrayed the Mongols, and Genghis Khan's wrath was swift and devastating. He unleashed innovative tactics, like siege warfare with catapults and towers, overwhelming the Jin defenses. City after city fell. The world was beginning to see that the Mongols, once dismissed as chaotic nomads, were now an unstoppable force. As the smoke cleared from the battlefield, Genghis Khan knew his dream of an empire was no longer just a vision, it was becoming a reality. The foundations had been laid. The world was about to feel the full weight of his ambition, and history would never be the same. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories of legendary figures who shaped our world, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next one. Many think Genghis Khan's success was just about brute force, but that's far from the truth. His tactical genius and unconventional methods were what truly set him apart. As the Mongol Empire grew, it became a symbol of both utter destruction and undeniable power. The first major city to witness this power was Zhengdu, the capital of the Jin dynasty. Its defenders were smug, confident in their mighty walls, believing their city was impenetrable. But Genghis Khan, already a master of siege warfare, was about to teach them a brutal lesson. He unleashed massive trebuchets and other siege engines, relentlessly bombarding Zhengdu with a precision and intensity that left the defenders stunned. Panic set in as the war machines tore down their fortifications. They realized resistance was completely hopeless. The capital fell in 1215, leaving only devastation behind. But this was just the beginning. With the Jin dynasty defeated, Genghis Khan turned his gaze west, toward the vast Khwarezmian Empire. This would be the true test of his ambition. The Khwarezmian Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, made a fatal error. In 1218, he executed a Mongol trade envoy. This act of defiance infuriated Genghis Khan, who vowed to annihilate the entire empire. What followed was one of the bloodiest campaigns in history. In the winter of 1219, the Mongol armies descended like a storm upon the Khwarezmian heartland. Their strategy was a terrifying mix of speed, deception, and pure terror. They famously used the feigned retreat, luring enemy soldiers into a deadly trap. A small group would pretend to flee, drawing out the enemy, only for the main Mongol force to appear and ambush them. Combined with their legendary cavalry, this tactic allowed them to slice through Khwarezmian defenses effortlessly. The siege of Bukhara, one of the most revered cities in the Islamic world, became a chilling example of Mongol wrath. They surrounded the city, cutting off all supplies. Desperate pleas for mercy from the city's leaders were ignored. When Bukhara finally fell, the streets ran red. Genghis Khan reportedly ordered his men to kill every single living thing in the city, a brutal message to anyone who dared betray him. Cities like Samarkand and Nishapur soon met similar fates, falling one by one to the relentless Mongol war machine. With each victory, the Mongols' terrifying reputation spread like wildfire. The mere whisper of their name was enough to make entire civilizations tremble. But Genghis Khan's genius wasn't just in his ruthlessness, it was also in his ability to adapt and innovate. He knew his famous cavalry wasn't enough for every situation. So, he recruited the best engineers and specialists from the lands he conquered, creating a diverse army skilled in siege warfare, archery, and even naval combat. The conquest of the Khwarezmian Empire was more than just a military campaign. It was a statement. Genghis Khan was building an empire not just on territory but on a fearsome kind of respect. Yet his rule wasn't only about destruction. The cities fell. He laid the foundations for a new world order built on trade, law, and diplomacy. The Mongol Empire would become a crossroads where East met West, allowing ideas and goods to flow freely. But with great expansion came great challenges. The larger his empire grew, the harder it became to control. Genghis Khan's greatest battles weren't always against his enemies on the field, but against the forces that threatened to tear his empire apart from within. Thanks for watching, and be sure to follow 4 more epic stories from history. Genghis Khan's empire was growing at a staggering pace, stretching from the heart of Mongolia all the way to the gates of Europe. But with this vast expansion came a new kind of challenge. It wasn't just about winning battles anymore. It was about ruling a massive, diverse realm, home to countless cultures, languages, and traditions. Genghis Khan realized that military might alone wouldn't hold his empire together. He needed something more: a system of governance, laws, and most importantly, a sense of unity. Just as he had united the warring Mongol tribes, he set out to unify his new empire through a series of brilliant innovations. He created a legal code known as the Yasa. It was strict, yes, but it was also incredibly progressive for its time. The Yasa laid down laws for everything, from military discipline to social conduct, ensuring fairness and order across the land. It was a reflection of his vision for an empire where what mattered wasn't your family name, but your skill and loyalty. He didn't care for nobles who thought they were born to rule. Instead, he promoted people based on their ability. In fact, some of his most trusted generals were men he had once fought against. He saw their bravery, recognized their talent, and gave them immense power. One of the best examples is Subutai, a military genius who was instrumental in some of the Mongols' most famous victories. Genghis Khan knew that surrounding himself with the best people, no matter where they came from, was the key to a strong empire. This focus on meritocracy allowed the Mongols to tap into the full potential of their diverse subjects, turning a sprawling territory into a cohesive, functional unit. But maintaining that unity wasn't easy. The empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, and governing such a vast area was a logistical nightmare. The nomadic culture of the Mongols often clashed with the settled agricultural societies they conquered in places like China and Persia. Resistance was a constant threat. So, Genghis Khan didn't just rely on force. He understood the power of information and built a revolutionary communication network. He established the Yam, an extensive system of postal relay stations. This network allowed messages to travel with incredible speed across the empire, letting him stay in constant contact with his generals and administrators, even if they were thousands of miles away. The Yam system, along with the roads the Mongols built, not only helped govern the empire, but also laid the groundwork for the Silk Road to flourish, connecting east and west like never before. In this way, Genghis Khan wasn't just a conqueror, he was a builder. However, even a leader of his stature faced personal challenges that military genius couldn't solve. The biggest one was succession. Genghis Khan had several sons, and the question of who would inherit his colossal empire became a source of intense conflict. He had built this empire with blood and iron, but he knew it was fragile. He feared that after his death, his sons' rivalries would tear it all apart. This fear haunted him in his later years. He tried to prevent this by dividing the empire, assigning different territories to his sons and trusted generals. His third son, Gidai, was chosen as his successor, a decision that would shape the future of the Mongol Empire for generations. But even within his own family, the thirst for power grew. Betrayal loomed, and rumors of fierce rivalries between the brothers spread. As his health failed, Genghis Khan made one last desperate attempt to ensure the unity of his empire. When he died in 1227, his greatest fears were realized as a brutal power struggle erupted. His final days were filled with uncertainty, but the legacy he left was monumental. His empire, forged through ruthless strategy and unparalleled leadership, would endure for generations, a colossus that reshaped the world and connected continents for centuries to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. See you next time. In 1227, the world held its breath. Genghis Khan, the man who had forged the largest contiguous land empire in history, was dead. His passing didn't just mark the end of a life. It signaled the end of an era. The question on everyone's mind was simple. Could the colossal empire he built survive without him? In his final years, Genghis Khan's domain stretched from the plains of Mongolia to the heart of China, the Middle East, and even the edges of Eastern Europe. This vast empire, with all its military might and innovative administration, was held together by one thing: his incredible force of will. He had built a system based on merit and loyalty, but beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Power struggles were brewing among his sons and ambitious generals. Sensing this, Genghis Khan had named his son Gedai as his successor. He believed Gedai was the most capable of maintaining the empire's unity. But even as the great Khan was laid to rest, his empire began to tremble. Other sons, like Chagatai, felt they were more deserving and started to push back against Gedai's authority. The task of holding everything together was monumental. Gedai Khan took the throne and tried to continue his father's legacy. The Mongol Empire kept expanding under his rule, but the strain was showing. The sheer vastness of the empire, its diverse peoples, and complex governance systems made it incredibly difficult to manage. The territories once united were now split among Genghis Khan's sons. Resistance grew in places like Persia and Central Asia, where the memory of Mongol brutality was still fresh. The real crisis came with Gedai's death in 1241. It sparked another wave of instability. His sons and generals, now openly fighting for power, couldn't stop the empire's slow disintegration. The Mongol Empire eventually fractured into several distinct states, like the Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Golden Horde in the West. The unity that had been Genghis Khan's greatest strength was lost. But even as the empire fragmented, Genghis Khan's legacy was far from over. It was just beginning to reshape the world in new ways. The Silk Road, which he had revitalized, flourished under Mongol rule. This wasn't just about trading silk and spices. It was a superhighway for ideas, technologies, and knowledge. Science, medicine, and engineering flowed freely between East and West, planting the seeds for Europe's Renaissance centuries later. Think about communication. The Mongols established a revolutionary postal relay system called the Yam. It was like the internet of its day, allowing messages and officials to travel with incredible speed across vast distances. This system inspired future empires and forever changed how information was shared. And of course, there's the Mongol people themselves. Even after the empire split, they remained a powerful force. Their way of war, focused on speed, precision, and psychological tactics, became a textbook for armies around the world for generations. Over time, Genghis Khan became a legend. In the lands he once ruled, he was revered as a visionary leader, a symbol of strength and unity. His name evokes both awe and fear, a testament to his complex and profound impact on history. Rising from humble beginnings to conquer the world through sheer will and strategic genius, his story remains a powerful lesson. The Mongol Empire he built may have eventually crumbled, but the world it created was forever changed. His vision of a connected world, though forged in conquest, left behind a legacy that continues to echo down the corridors of history. Genghis Khan's story is one of ambition, power, and the enduring mark one person can leave on the world. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey through history fascinating, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time. When we think of Genghis Khan, images of brutal conquests and sweeping wars often come to mind. But to see him only as a conqueror is to miss the true depth of his legacy. While his name is forever linked to the devastation of cities and civilizations, It's the lasting impact of his rule that truly defines his place in history. In many ways, Genghis Khan's empire wasn't just built on military might. It was the creation of a visionary who knew that a lasting empire needed more. It became a crossroads of cultures, ideas, and trade. And even though it crumbled in the generations after his death, the forces he set in motion reshaped our world forever. First and foremost, the Mongol Empire was a bridge of connection between East and West. Between the diverse cultures of Asia and the civilizations of Europe and the Middle East. Before the Mongols, these worlds were largely isolated. Under Genghis Khan, the vast expanse of his empire became a highway for trade, culture, and knowledge. The Silk Road, once a fragmented and dangerous route, flourished under Mongol control. Merchants, scholars, and travelers could now move freely across Eurasia, exchanging goods, ideas, and technologies. This cultural exchange laid the foundation for future intellectual revolutions, most notably the European Renaissance. It was through Mongol expansion that Chinese gunpowder, Persian medicine, and Arabic mathematics made their way westward, transforming European societies centuries later. Genghis Khan's empire also created an era of relative peace, often called the Pax Mongolica. During this period, from the 13th to the early 14th century, trade thrived, and the cultural exchange between East and West reached unprecedented heights. This stability was remarkable, considering the violence that came before it. Thanks to Genghis Khan's administrative genius, the Mongols established systems of law, efficient postal networks, and economic policies that helped unite their vast territories. This sense of order was instrumental in fostering the cross-cultural exchange that would have such lasting consequences. But the story of Genghis Khan's empire is also a cautionary tale about the fragility of power. After his death, the Mongol Empire split into multiple khanates, each with its own rulers and ambitions. This fragmentation was a stark reminder that even the most formidable empires are vulnerable to internal divisions. In the centuries that followed, the once mighty Mongol forces were broken apart by dynastic struggles, external invasions, and the sheer complexity of managing such a diverse empire. The rise and fall of the Mongol Empire shows how even the most brilliant leaders cannot escape the tides of history. Yet, despite the empire's eventual decline, the world it left behind was irreversibly altered. Genghis Khan's legacy is still with us today. We see his impact in the cultures and nations that were shaped by Mongol rule. From China to Russia to the Middle East, his vision of a world united by law, trade, and a shared sense of purpose resonates in our own globalized world. The lessons from his rise from humble beginnings to the ruler of a continent-spanning empire are timeless. His ability to unite disparate peoples, his strategic genius, and his sheer determination are still studied by leaders across the globe. Genghis Khan was more than a warlord. He was a statesman, a lawgiver, and a visionary. His empire, though it shattered after his death, set the stage for the complex, interconnected world we know today. And while his methods were often brutal, there's no denying that his empire brought a form of order to chaos. It was a world reshaped by the Mongol spirit, bearing the indelible marks of his rule long after he was gone. As we conclude this journey, one truth remains clear: the echoes of his empire, his conquests, and his visions still resonate across the centuries. The world we inhabit, its politics, its trade, its culture has been shaped by the forces Genghis Khan unleashed. His story, filled with triumph and tragedy, is a powerful reminder that the ambitions of one person, fueled by vision and determination, can alter the course of history forever. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and fall of Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire. If you found this story fascinating, be sure to subscribe for more tales from the annals of history. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll explore other legendary figures who changed the world in their own unforgettable ways. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, the world held its breath. The man who had built an empire from fire and blood was gone, but the Mongol Empire was far from over. It didn't collapse, it evolved, it fractured. Yes, but it also expanded, stretching even further across the globe under the rule of his ambitious descendants. Genghis Khan's vast domain was divided among his sons and top generals, creating several khanates, each with a great deal of autonomy. But this division didn't lead to instant chaos. The groundwork he laid his laws, his military strategies, and his vision of unity continued to steer the fate of nations for decades. His chosen successor, Genghis, took the title of Great Khan. Under his command, the Mongol Empire reached its absolute peak. Genghis set his sights on Eastern Europe, and the results were staggering. In 1237, the Golden Horde, led by Genghis's grandson, Batu Khan, began its conquest of the Kievan Rus. City after city fell, and by 1240, the magnificent city of Kyiv was utterly destroyed. This was a turning point in Russian history. Mongol domination would last for nearly 250 years, fundamentally shaping Russian politics and identity. Meanwhile, another Mongol army, led by the brilliant general Subutai, stormed into Hungary and Poland. By 1241, they were at the gates of Vienna. The siege of Pest, now part of Budapest, was a terrifying display of Mongol military precision. It seemed nothing could stop them from conquering all of Europe. But then, news arrived from the east. Genghis, the Great Khan, was dead. Following Mongol tradition, Batu Khan and his forces withdrew from Europe to participate in the succession. Europe was saved not by an army, but by the death of a single man thousands of miles away. Back in the east, another of Genghis's grandsons, Kublai Khan, was making history. He established the Yuan dynasty in China, finally conquering the last remnants of the Song dynasty in 1279. Kublai was a pragmatic ruler, blending Mongol customs with Chinese systems of governance. He understood that to rule a land, you had to adapt to it. His court was a center of culture and art, but the Mongol emphasis on military might and strict laws was a constant reminder of his grandfather's legacy. Further west in Persia, the Ilkhanate rose from the ashes of Genghis Khan's initial devastating campaigns. Here, something remarkable happened, a fusion of Mongol and Persian culture. The same Mongols who had sacked Baghdad in 1258, a catastrophe for the intellectual world, began to patronize Persian scientists, artists, and thinkers. They were being transformed by the very culture they had nearly wiped out. But the Mongol impact wasn't just military and political. They were masters of commerce. Genghis Khan had secured the Silk Road, and his successors turned it into the most extensive trade network the world had ever seen. Goods, technologies, and ideas flowed freely across Eurasia, from China to the Middle East. This Mongol-enforced peace, or Pax Mongolica, fostered an era of unprecedented economic integration, setting the stage for the globalized world we know today. However, the unity Genghis Khan fought so hard to maintain couldn't last forever. After Genghis's death, succession struggles intensified. The once unified empire began to crack, splintering into rival factions. Kublai Khan's authority in China didn't extend to his relatives ruling the Golden Horde or the Ilkhanate. The internal rivalries grew, and by the late 14th century, the singular Mongol Empire was no more. Yet its legacy is undeniable. The empire may have faded, but the connections it forged the blending of cultures. The opening of east to west, the explosion of trade permanently altered the course of history. From China to Russia to the Middle East, the Mongol influence is still visible today. Genghis Khan didn't just conquer nations, he rewrote the very rules of civilization. His story is a powerful testament to how one person's vision can reshape the entire world. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to subscribe for more. Even after the Mongol Empire started to splinter into different Khanates, the massive changes it brought to world history were far from over. The legacy of Genghis Khan and his descendants would echo through the centuries, influencing everything from global trade to the rise of new world powers. Their empire, though fragmented, had planted the seeds for a more connected world. One of the most profound impacts of the Mongol conquests was the dramatic shift in global trade. The empire's enormous size, stretching from the heart of China to the plains of Eastern Europe, created an interconnected world like never before. The Silk Road, once a messy and dangerous web of trade routes, became a thriving artery of commerce under Mongol rule. Mongol control over Central Asia, Persia, and parts of Europe formed a single economic zone, allowing goods, ideas, and technologies to flow freely across continents. This wasn't just a route for luxuries like silk and spices, it was a highway for ideas and technologies that would shape the future. Under the Mongols, merchants were granted safe passage across the empire. The Pax Mongolica, or Mongol peace, wasn't just a term, it was a reality. The dangerous journey along the Silk Road became safer than ever. Caravans carrying everything from Chinese porcelain to Persian carpets could travel thousands of miles without the constant threat of bandits. It wasn't just material goods that moved along these routes. Ideas and technologies spread as well. For instance, Chinese gunpowder reached Europe via the Mongols, forever changing the course of military history. The spread of Islam was another major consequence of Mongol expansion. Initially, Genghis Khan's Mongols didn't care much about spreading any particular religion. His empire was pragmatic and religiously tolerant. However, as Mongols settled in Persia, Iraq, and other parts of the Muslim world, many, including Genghis Khan's own descendants, converted to Islam. The Ilkhanate embraced Islam in the 13th century, a shift that had huge consequences for the Middle East. It not only helped spread Islamic culture eastward, but also led to a flourishing of arts, sciences, and architecture under Mongol rule. Cities like Tabriz and Baghdad became major cultural hubs. Despite this, the Mongols' destruction of Baghdad in 1258 remains one of their most controversial acts. Under Hulagu Khan, the Mongols sacked the great city, home to the famed House of Wisdom, a global center of learning. The destruction was devastating, leading to the loss of countless texts and the deaths of many scholars. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, this tragedy indirectly led to the preservation of Persian and Arabic knowledge in other places like Cairo, which later fueled an intellectual revival in the Islamic world. In the East, the Yuan dynasty in China, established by Kublai Khan, left a deep mark on Chinese society. Kublai's rule brought stability to a China that had been torn apart by internal conflict. His reign saw the rise of Mongol-ruled China as a dominant political and cultural power. One of the biggest changes was the increased integration of China with the wider world. The Yuan dynasty's openness to foreign ideas led to cultural exchanges that enriched both Chinese and European societies. Marco Polo famously traveled to the Yuan court, and his documented experiences opened up China to the European imagination. However, as the Mongol Empire's descendants continued to rule, the fragmentation eventually led to internal strife and rebellion. The empire was simply too vast to manage once centralized control was lost. Family rivalries and power struggles began to chip away at its strength. The Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Yuan dynasty in China would all eventually fall to pressures from within and without. Perhaps the most dramatic transformation happened in Russia. While the Mongols had dominated the Russian principalities for centuries, their eventual departure left Russia in a position to forge a new identity. Moscow emerged as the new center of power, uniting Russia under a single banner. This new Russia, shaped by Mongol influence, would turn its focus westward, beginning a new chapter in Eurasian history. Even as the Mongol Empire fractured, the very idea of their warfare continued to influence military strategy for centuries. Their ability to mobilize vast armies quickly, their use of spies and psychological warfare, and their devastating cavalry tactics would be studied by military leaders for generations. Even in modern warfare, elements of the Mongol approach, like surprise, rapid mobility, and intimidation, can still be seen. In the end, Genghis Khan's empire was more than just a fleeting moment of world domination. It was a world-changing force that permanently altered the political, cultural, and economic map of Eurasia. Even as the Mongol Khanates dissolved, their influence persisted. They carved a path of destruction, but they also sowed the seeds of cultural exchange, intellectual growth, and economic prosperity. The echoes of Genghis Khan's conquests continue to shape the modern interconnected world that he unknowingly set into motion. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that shaped our world. The story of Genghis Khan isn't just about one man's ambition. It's the saga of a world reshaped by a single, unrelenting vision. From the harsh steppes of Mongolia to the heart of Europe, the Mongol Empire carved its mark across the globe, leaving a legacy that still echoes in the halls of history. His empire, once united by his iron will, may have fragmented after his death, but the changes he set in motion are still felt across continents. Genghis Khan's conquests weren't just about destruction, they were about transformation. He didn't simply conquer cities, he transformed the very structure of societies, cultures, and economies. Under his rule, the Silk Road flourished like never before, connecting the distant corners of the known world. He ushered in an era of unprecedented exchange of goods, ideas, and innovations that would shape the future of civilization. His mastery of military tactics, his ability to unite disparate peoples under a single banner, and his vision for a world bound by law and trade were revolutionary. But Genghis Khan also knew the limits of his own mortality. In his final years, he must have realized that his vast empire couldn't last forever under one man's rule. And yet his death didn't signal the end of his empire's influence. The foundations he laid endured, carried forward by his sons and grandsons who continued his work of expansion, governance, and cultural exchange. Though the empire eventually broke apart, the seeds he had planted grew into new dynasties, new powers, and new relationships between East and West. The Mongol influence on trade, culture, and military strategy is a testament to the lasting power of their empire. The world became more connected than ever, and the effects of this interconnectedness would shape human history for centuries. From the rise of the Yuan dynasty in China to the expansion of the Russian Empire, from the intellectual exchange that flowed along the Silk Road to the very way warfare was fought, the Mongols left behind a world forever altered. Of course, Genghis Khan's legacy is full of contradictions. He is remembered as both a brutal conqueror and a visionary leader. A man who waged wars of unimaginable scale, yet also laid the groundwork for one of the most remarkable periods of peace and cultural flourishing in history, the Pax Mongolica. The bloodshed he caused is undeniable, but so are the innovations and opportunities he created for future generations. It's a legacy of both destruction and creation, reflecting the complexities of power, ambition, and the human condition. In the end, the story of Genghis Khan is not just about the empire he built, but the world he shaped. A world where trade routes stretched across continents, where cultures collided and merged, and where the very idea of empire was redefined. He was a man who rose from nothing, a boy born into the harshest circumstances who, through sheer will and vision, built an empire that spanned the known world. His story is one of human determination, of what's possible when one person dares to dream beyond the horizon and unite people who had never known unity before. As we look at the world today, the echoes of Genghis Khan's conquests still resonate. His legacy lives on, not just in the lands he once ruled, but in the connections between peoples and nations that he forged through his empire. It's a reminder that history isn't made in a single moment, but by the people, and events that shape the world through vision, ambition, and the will to create something greater than themselves. The story of Genghis Khan is a story of a man who changed the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the rise and legacy of the Mongol Empire. If you've enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to Echoes of War, where we continue to explore the untold stories of history's greatest conquerors, visionaries, and leaders. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll dive into another chapter of history, rich with triumphs, tragedies, and the legacies that shaped the world we know today. Nearly 1,000 years ago, one man rose from the vast, unforgiving steppe and shook the very foundations of the world. His name was Genghis Khan, and he built an empire larger than any other in human history. It stretched from the frozen tundras of Siberia to the scorching deserts of Persia, from the Great Wall of China to the bustling streets of Baghdad. This was no ordinary man. This was a warlord who forged a fractured and broken people into the most feared fighting force the world had ever known. But what if I told you that Genghis Khan, the man who ruled more land than the Romans, did so with a singular vision? A vision built not just on warfare, but on unity, strategy, and a brutal sense of justice. Picture this. It's the year 1206. The Mongol tribes are scattered, constantly warring amongst themselves. A young boy named Temujin has already endured unimaginable hardships, is kidnapped at 9, betrayed by his own clan, and left to fight for survival in the wilderness. He saw the brutalities of war, the betrayals, and the raw, savage way of life that defined his people. but the lessons he learned in the unforgiving steppe would forge him into someone far greater than anyone could have ever imagined. He would become Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the conqueror whose name would send tremors through the world for centuries. But how did a boy, born into such despair, become the man who would build the largest contiguous empire in history? It wasn't just the battles he won, or the warriors he commanded. What made Genghis Khan stand apart was his sheer determination to unite an entire people who had never known unity. The Mongols were disjointed and divided, locked in blood feuds over power, land, and resources. Yet Genghis Khan saw something they didn't envision of a unified Mongol nation, where loyalty, discipline, and a shared cause would triumph over the chaos that had kept them apart. But it wasn't just his fierce will that drove his conquests. It was his mastery of the art of war, his use of psychological warfare, and his innovative military tactics. Above all, it was his ability to inspire unwavering loyalty in his men. While his rivals built their armies through sheer numbers, Genghis Khan crafted one of the most efficient and terrifying military machines the world had ever seen. Horsemen, archers, and spies, each was a perfect cog in the machinery of his conquest. Every battle was not just a fight for territory, but a battle for hearts and minds. He knew that fear could be a weapon as powerful as steel. As the Mongol Empire grew, so too did its legend. Great cities like Samarkand, Baghdad, and Nishapur fell before his unstoppable forces. His armies, seemingly invincible, swept across the ancient Silk Road, crushing anything in their path. The very idea of a Mongol invasion sent shockwaves through entire civilizations. But, as we'll soon discover, Genghis Khan was not merely a conqueror. He was also a statesman, a lawmaker, and a builder of empires. His legacy wouldn't just be the bloodshed that followed him, but also the infrastructure, trade, and cultural exchanges that flourished under his reign. He established a postal system, the Yam, which connected his vast empire, and enforced a rule of law, the Yasa, that brought order to his people. He promoted trade and protected merchants, effectively creating one of the first free trade zones in history. So how did Genghis Khan come to rule the world? How did a man from such humble beginnings become a figure whose legacy still echoes through the corridors of history? This story is not just about conquest, it's about vision, leadership, and the ability to transform chaos into order. It's a story of survival, of triumph against all odds, and of a leader whose ambition knew no limits. Imagine the dust of the Mongol steppe kicking up beneath the hooves of thousands of horses. The roar of battle is coming, and with it, a force that will change the course of history forever. The world is about to witness the rise of one of its most unstoppable figures. This is the story of how Genghis Khan ruled the world. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories that shaped our world. See you next time.